Welcome to the Better Two podcast. I'm your host, Donna. Today's guest is Paul Leary. Paul is from the Butthole Surfers, and we talk about their new music, which is actually old music, but it's kind of new music because, well, there's a story behind it. So tune in. Hi, Paul. How are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. I hope you are too.
I am. I am. It's been a day, but it's worked out okay. So you you have a long storied career with the Butthole Surfers, and the record that you have coming out in June has a long journey as well
Yes, it does.
because powers that be didn't quite like it when it was back then,
No, the powers that be liked it actually.
did they?
Um, we made a record, we mixed it, we had it mastered, commissioned artwork from famous artist Mark Ryden. It was all ready to go. Capitol Records sent out promo copies, and then our relationship soured with the label. I think it had a lot to do with our manager uh, returning to his dope ways after being sober for many years, and that kind of things got wrecked, and we got dropped, and that was the end of that album on Capitol.
And so then you were kind of tied to contracts, I'm sure, about being able to release it then, correct?
Yeah, we were dropped, but our contract was not dropped. So we spent the next couple of years in limbo, not being able to release an album or do anything because Capitol just kind of sat on us and said, "Too bad."
That happened in Rick Springfield's early career too with RCA. He had the same kind of deal. He recorded stuff, and then all of a sudden, he couldn't do anything. He was under contract, and it wasn't working out, so he ended up being a soap opera actor.
Cool. I never considered that. Back then I was really into the Young and the Restless. I would have loved to have been a soap opera star.
I'm sure it would have been fun. So you decided now, after all of this, to release the record, and it seems kind of timely as far as what's going on in our world. At least Jet Fighter does.
Yeah, I've been hearing that, and it's not the first time that's happened on our records. But yeah, I was a couple of years ago. I was going through our old Butthole Surfer storage space, and we were clearing it out, and there was tape stashed all the way in the back, and I ran across the old 2-inch multi tracks for that album, and got to thinking, oh, I would love to mix that now that I'm a better mixer than I was 20 years ago, and I would love to mix that. And so I contacted Hollywood Records, who owned the rights to that album. They bought it from Capitol, and to their credit, they said we could release it. Got it on paper and everything. So kudos to Hollywood Records. That was a cool thing for them to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially, are they still going to be part of the label or they just gave it to you outright?
They just gave it to us outright. It's coming out on Sunset Boulevard Records, so it's a completely different deal.
That's what I thought, but I wanted to confirm because, sometimes people have little niche
Yeah.
labels. So, how does it feel to step back into that time period? You know, since this was the late 90s when you wrote this, mid to late 90s, how does it feel to go back and revisit that music? I mean, does it still feel pure in your heart, or is it just, okay, we're going to do this?
It felt very pure in my heart. You know, I we we signed a deal with Matador Records to re-release all of our pre-major label records, and so I'd been going through the tape vaults, remixing and remastering, and putting all that stuff back together again. So I was kind of used to going back in time and listening to our old music. Some of it from 1983, and it was really fun because I thought this record was well recorded. It sounded good, and I liked the songs, and it reminded me of a really good time that the band had in the studio. Putting all the pieces together that we'd been working on at home, and so it was a fun process. It was fun to mix and fun to listen to, and I'm just thrilled that it's finally coming out.
What would you
The
take?
uh, the
Go ahead. Go
the
ahead.
ver- I was just going to say that the version of it that did come out was called Weird Revolution, and when Hollywood Records bought the project, they wanted it to be different than what Capitol had. And so they wanted songs remixed and rearranged, and some songs left off and others added. And that was a painful process for us because we had the record that we wanted the way we wanted it. And then to be told, no, it's got to be different or no deal. And so we were kind of forced to play along. And I'm just so happy that we get to do it the way we wanted it done. And so that's what's coming out this summer.
And that's kind of what I was referring to when I said the powers that be weren't quite happy with it because you had to go back in the studio. And I talked to Tracy Bonham, and she went kind of through the same thing. She had a label, and she had her second record done, and then the label sold, was bought out, and she was transferred to another division that didn't know anything about the type of music. And so she was left in limbo, kind of figuring out, what do I make? And I think that happened to quite a few artists in the late 90s. It's like music was evolving, and we had Napster, and we had all those other things coming about that changed the game.
Well, that was dark days for the music business. Dark, dark days. I almost declared bankruptcy during that period, and all of a
Wow.
sudden music should be free. My lawyer should be free. He's not.
But isn't that the same thing you're dealing with now with like Spotify?
Spotify actually pays.
Yeah, but do they pay pennies?
I don't understand how the whole thing works, but if you're a big time act, like say Sublime,
Hmm.
they get more per play than a little guy. And I
Right.
don't know why, but that's the gist of it. And so like I make a pretty good living off of Sublime.
Well, and
you
that's I
know,
mean, it's the same thing with as an author for KDP or Kindle Unlimited, we get paid like 0.0006 per page read. How do you even figure that out? But okay. And and the thing is now you also have to contend with Spotify and other services, the AI slop music that's coming out.
I have not heard the AI music slop that's coming out other than like joke songs where, country western singers are singing filthy, horrible, perverted lyrics, which is kind of amusing for a second. But I don't listen to a whole lot of music actually, so a lot of that's just passing me by.
Be thankful because I mean it's kind of everywhere and some songs have actually made it into the charts, which is just crazy.
I have a brilliant cousin who's older than I am, and like 20 or 30 years ago, he was working at Texas Instruments in their artificial intelligence division. They had one back then, and he was telling me, you can have a computer write music. What do you think about that? And I was like, well, can you teach a computer to have a broken heart or be pissed off? It's just I didn't see any future for it back then, and so I'm still a little skeptical, I guess,
Well,
because
no,
that's
that's
where it comes from the heart. It doesn't come from the chips.
exactly, and that's the thing why it's called slop because like in the author world, you have people that are writing books that it's like, okay, this woman discovers her missing mother that's been gone since she was 7 years old, and she's now in her 20s, and she has no emotion to this. It's like there'd be something there. There would be. But if you could go back in time to when I mean, because I did some research. If you could go back in time and tell the little kid who was going to be in a band, that got his first guitar, would you tell him anything different to change his journey even slightly?
No, I would not. I started playing guitar back in like 1962. Got my first electric guitar in like 66 or something, and played in my first band that year in front of the whole elementary school, and did it again in the sixth grade, and played in garage bands through junior high school and high school. And then I gave up guitar in college. I just thought it's not going to happen for me. I'm not good enough, and I'd rather be the next Pablo Picasso. So I put the guitar down for 4 years, and it wasn't until I met Gibby Haynes, who was an accounting student, and he landed a great job out of college with Pete Marwick and Mitchell, which at the time was the biggest accounting firm in the world. And he quickly discovered that he wasn't cut out to be an accountant. So he wanted to be in a band, and he kept trying to talk me into playing guitar in his band, and I was reluctant, and finally went over to the practice space one day and played with him, and then I was hooked again. So I'm sorry, I can't even remember the question now.
No, that's fine. It was just about if you could go back and tell yourself something different, and it obviously not. But
Oh,
you
but
also,
I have regrets about certain things and certain things I've done and certain
we all
things
do.
that turned out the way they did. But on the other hand, I met my wife, and she's just the greatest thing in the world that ever happened to me. And I would be afraid that if I changed any single detail in my life, that that would not have happened. So I wouldn't change a thing.
Get that. I can understand that completely. So when did you pick up the bass and the keyboards?
That would have been shortly after joining Gibby in the practice space. We didn't really have a bass player, but we had a bass guitar. We would kind of pass the bass guitar around and take turns with it. And when we went into the studio to record our first record for Alternative Tentacles, we did not have a bass player. So, the bass isn't that far off from being a guitar. I'm not a bass player, but I can play a bass and do enough to satisfy my meager needs. And keyboards, I can't play keyboards, but I can press down on a key and make a sound and shoot.
So you guys have a documentary that you filmed, and it was shown at South by Southwest and a couple other festivals. When is that going to be coming out?
Supposedly this summer, I've been trying to stay out of the process of getting a deal signed for distribution, but it's just not in my power, and I'm going crazy waiting for it to happen. But it's actually showed at quite a few film festivals around the world, Tokyo, Australia, Europe, and it's gotten great receptions everywhere, and even standing ovations and stuff. It's a really good documentary. I'm shocked as hell at how good it came out. Um, but it's tough. Movie business is tough. I think it's probably tougher than the music business. So we'll have to see. I think it's going to get at least a limited theatrical release. I know the Alamo Drafthouse chain, which is like 43 theaters, they're planning on showing it. And then as far as streaming, I don't know how that's going to go. I was supposed to get word this week on uh, something happening, and then I never heard anything. So who knows?
Well, there's a lot going on. I mean, it seems like, time is flying. We're almost through the month of May. It's like, how did that happen? But here we are.
Well, when you're old like I am, time does fly. Nobody explained that to me when I was 10 years old. That hey, an hour now is going to be 5 seconds when you're 69 years old.
Trust me. I mean, I'm not as old as you, but I'm up there and I understand. I do. Um, so Charlie Sexton went to the South by Southwest premiere, correct?
Yeah,
So how do you know Charlie? I remember Charlie from Pictures of Pleasure, I think it was, and it was a great record. But how did you know?
he's an Austin guy, and
Yeah.
he did a lot of practicing at the what we call the ARC, the Austin Rehearsal Complex, back in the 80s and 90s, and particularly the 90s, and uh, which is where my current wife used to work, as she was one of the art girls. But he was there, and so I'd run into him, and he's a super nice guy, really friendly, and every time I see him, he's just super fun to be around and super nice. I can't say enough nice things about Charlie.
Yeah, I was perusing your Instagram and I saw you had a cat too. So,
Oh yeah, Milo. He may come. Well, no, he just had his dinner, so he's gonna leave me alone.
yeah, I saw him. He's like, it's a cute kitty. I have a cat. I adopted a cat recently, so he may make an appearance when he launches in here. Sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't.
Well, I hope he does.
I don't know because then it'll be total chaos. My other cat who passed in January, she was chill. She'd paw at me, want some treats, and that was it. He, on the other hand, is just crazy. But he's a good cat. So when you look at the documentary and you look back at your time, and yes, I have a dog too. When you look back at your time going through the film and setting up the documentary, I'm sure you had some approval in it. You just didn't let it go willy-nilly. What was it like watching that and seeing your history?
Well, I actually learned things that I didn't know, like particularly about Gibby, who experienced severe childhood trauma that I was not aware of until I saw the documentary. And that's to director Tom Stern's credit that he spent years interviewing people and interviewing the band. And Gibby does great interviews, but he tends to like deflect on questions and gives funny answers and does funny things. And Tom was determined to get to the root of things, and he just persisted until uh, finally he brought in Bob Forrest, who's an old friend of Gibby's, and between Tom and Bob Forrest, they were able to get Gibby to open up about the reality of what happened to him in his childhood, and um, suddenly things made a lot more sense to me about my dear friend Gibby. And so I learned a few things, but it's a fun watch because of the editing. One of the things that Tom Stern did was he went out and got a fabulous editor. And I've seen some music documentaries where it's just a lot of talking heads and one after another. Nobody wants to see that shit. And Tom just assembled all these. He probably interviewed 50 people, and maybe 20 of them made the cut. And he would just use little clips here and there. He would tell a story and then just like clip, clip, clip of different people talking about it. And it's really fun and fun to watch that way. So, uh, and I sort of, I was with Tom when we came up with the thought of making the documentary about 6 years ago or so. Uh, he got a hold of an old copy of his movie called Freaked. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
Mm-mm.
There's a short movie on YouTube called I can't even remember what it's called, but it features the Butthole Surfers as a hick family in Texas, and then this family, a husband and wife and their young son, uh, are coming through Texas, and they stop by and see the Butthole Surfers, and the little kid ends up getting barbecued and served as a meal to the parents, and it's really cornball stupid. But that was made by Tom Stern and Alex Winter, and so I've known Tom since the '80s,
Mm-hmm.
and so we've had a lot of people approach us about wanting to make a documentary, and I've always been pretty I just didn't really want it. I didn't want to see my story. I didn't want it, but then Tom threw his hat in the ring, and all of a sudden it was like, now that makes sense because Tom was a big fan from the very beginning, and he's a comedic writer, and he's really talented, and he's persistent as hell. And so once he started doing it, um, we didn't always see eye to eye on things, but I deeply approve of the work that he did.
Well, that happens sometimes in documentaries. I mean, Pee Wee Herman's documentary, if you watch that, that's a prime example. I mean, he kept saying he didn't want to do it, he didn't want to do it. He did it, and he still held back. And
I
I
haven't
think
seen that, but I really want to see it because
it's a good
that
documentary. It is.
I bet it is. I mean, it's a great story, except for the fucking end. That guy got the fucking shaft.
Well, that's what they talked about. They talked about how, the first time he made it through without any problem, and they do explore his collection of it was gay images from the past. And that's what really nailed him. And there was no reason for it. But
No, and then masturbating in an adult theater. I mean, isn't that where you want somebody to masturbate? I
yeah,
mean, do you really want them masturbating in the schoolyard or
no,
no? I mean,
no. And I
so
mean, and
what the
that's he beat that. He had a career resurgence, and that's when they nailed him. And it really goes in depth into a lot of that stuff. But Pee Wee really, he was kind of quiet about not wanting to do some of the stuff about it.
I don't
So,
blame him. Bless his heart.
yeah. So, I mean, documentaries I think are good. I think you can learn a lot, and it's amazing that you're telling me that you learned something about a bandmate that you didn't even know, a friend that you didn't even know. And I think sometimes our friends keep secrets to themselves about what they go through without letting anybody know, because especially if they've dealt with trauma.
Yeah, I watched an early cut a year ago, and it got to the end, and it got to the to Gibby's childhood trauma, and I was like, oh no, Gibby's not going to let this be in the movie. There's just no way. And to his credit, he signed off on it, and I just thought that was super brave of him and super big of him, and he is a very strong guy, and so bless his heart, he allowed the story to be told. I just think that was really brave.
I think it's brave, and I think there's also the caveat of possibly maybe somebody else has gone through that and they can relate to it.
That probably had a lot to do with him signing off. Have you seen the documentary?
I did not see the documentary. I saw the trailer,
Okay.
and the trailer looked good. So that's why I was kind of curious as to when it might actually come out. So,
Well, that's the trailers have been pretty good, and the movie is just like the trailers. It's just bam, bam, bam.
and that's what, if you're watching a documentary, that's where time will fly through it because it is moving so fast paced.
Yeah, not all music documentaries turn out that great. I mean, I just watched recently the Led Zeppelin documentary, the one that ends with a whole lot of love and doesn't go beyond that. And that's a band that I've loved since I've first time I heard them, and I just thought that could have been a whole lot better. I don't know
Well,
if you've seen that one.
no, I have not. But I mean, then you think back to, let's go back to the 90s. Behind the Music, VH1. That gave you this scratch surface of it did not really tell you what was going on. It just gave you enough to titillate, and that was about it. It
Well, one of the
was
problems with that documentary was the fact that the only people they interviewed were the members of the band, the surviving members of the band, and most of them are pretty soft spoken. So you get these interviews where they would talk like this, and you couldn't hear what they were saying.
yes.
I'd be turning the TV up to 10 just to hear what they were saying, and then they'd play music, and it would blow my head off. And then
Mhm.
after a while, I was just couldn't take turning the volume up and down. But it's like, come on, man, you could do better than that.
And then, of course, once they aired it once, Leif Garrett, how many times did you see that one air? All the time. It's like one of the favorite ones they chose. So, do you have any plans to go out on the road at all with this?
No, none at
I
all.
didn't think so,
I
but
have plans. I have plans to not go out on the road. We had a screening in Los Angeles at the Egyptian Theater last year, and we were there for a Q&A after the movie, and we did a surprise set. We played three songs, and that was a whole lot of fun. I can handle three songs, but you know, playing guitar for an hour or an hour and a half is harder work than it looks, and I'm not in shape to do that. I don't even have calluses on my fingers anymore. I hardly ever touch a guitar, and I kind of feel like I've said everything I wanted to say, and I've seen what AC/DC looks like playing at the age of 90 or however old they are, and I just don't want to be that. It's rock and roll is a young man's game, and we're not young anymore.
Paul McCartney, there you go. That's all you really need to say is Paul McCartney. No offense to
Uh,
him, but you know,
no offense to him, but I guess you watch Saturday Night Live.
I watched part of it. I didn't watch all of it. I just watched part of it. I was just kind of
It
like,
was brutal.
when he was on like 10 years ago, I thought he should stop.
I mean, bless his heart. He's doing it obviously because he loves it, not because he needs the money or anything like that. So that's cool. But yeah, I'd rather just listen to the Beatles that I loved from the '60s.
Hmm. So you're not going to tour. So what do you do in your free time now?
I ride my bicycle and I go swimming and I take my wife to dinner and I do. Occasionally, I'll produce an album for somebody, and I do mixing work from time to time. Nothing too strenuous. I'm just really trying to enjoy life. I know I'm getting old, and there's other things to life than being in the studio. And I've spent decades in the studio, and I've loved every second of it. But I kind of like watching Judge Judy and eating pizza on Friday nights, that kind of stuff.
Well, and there, when you're talking about producing music, that's a whole nother vibe. You get to be a master of creation in a way. You get to mix it, you get to produce it, you get to create a sound that may be different, and you're not going through all the stress necessarily of it. You're not going,
I produced, the early Butthole Surfer albums, and I didn't know what a producer was. All I knew was I liked recording and I liked being in the studio, and I couldn't get enough of it. And I soaked up as much knowledge of doing it as I could until finally I realized, hey, I could do this for another band besides the Butthole Surfers. And uh, back in the mid '80s, I was listening to this band called Bad Livers. It was a sort of a bluegrass, psychedelic bluegrass band from Austin, and I'd go see them play every week at the Saxon Pub. And finally, one evening, I told them, "Hey, if you let me produce an album, I'll pay for studio time," and they agreed. And so that was my first, real production job. And it's still out. You can still get it. It's a good record. But the Meat Puppets liked that record, and they approached me. I was good friends with the Meat Puppets, and they approached me about wanting John Paul Jones to produce an album for them, and asked me if I would ask John Paul Jones if he would do it. And I said sure, because I thought for sure John Paul Jones would do it. He did the stupid Butthole Surfer. Surely he'd do the Meat Puppets. And I'd played the Meat Puppets for him a lot, and while we worked together in the studio for a couple of months. And he turned him down. And so I called him up to give him the news, and they said, "Sorry, man, he doesn't want to do it." And then they said, "Well, we like that Bad Livers album. Will you do it?" So I was like, "Hell yeah, I'll do it." Meat Puppets were my favorite band in the world at that time. And so that was my first paid production job. And then after that, I kind of had it had a hit song, a radio hit, and it went gold and all that. And so I was a producer at that point. And then Sublime came along. They liked that Meat Puppets album and asked me if I'd work on their self-titled album. And I couldn't believe that. That was a real stroke of luck, because I was listening to them. While I was working on the Meat Puppets' next album, I was listening to Date Rape on the radio every day and just loving it. And then that was quite a call to get. Do you want to work with Sublime? It's like, fuck yeah, I want to work with Sublime.
and see, you built the career by, dare I say, the people you like, they actually resonated towards you. So that's a gift.
Yeah, that was in the analog days, tape and all of
Yeah.
that. And then the digital came along, and I felt like a silent movie actor trying to transition to the talkies. It was rough. I struggled for a while, and I'm finally getting my chops down digitally. I have a Pro Tools studio in my house, and I do a lot of work. I'm a lot better at it than I was when I first went digital. That was a rough period.
Oh, I'm sure. So when you look back at your touring days, since we're not going to be touring, and I mean, your shows were known for being a bit over the top at times.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder now, and that's probably why I don't want to tour anymore. Because we had balls of fire on stage and shotgun blasts, and that that wasn't just occasionally, that was every night. And after a while, it kind of gets to you. And then 9/11 came along, and I watched those World Trade Center towers coming down, and the violence and the horror of it. And all of a sudden, it's like I kind of lost my appetite for Bedlam at that point. And it's like, the belching flames and explosions and things just didn't appeal to me so much after that. So, and that's kind of what we were about. I remember back in like 1991, falling asleep in front of the TV at my house and waking up at 2 in the morning. The TV was flashing, and the TV had left it on, and the TV was flashing, and I was like, "What the hell?" And I look up at it, and the TV's flashing, and I see balls of flame and this horrible racket coming out of the speaker, and I was like, "Now that's what a rock show should be." And then I realized, oh, that's us.
You can leave
You
it.
know, it was fun. It was fun, but it's time to move on.
You can leave it to Guar, and people of that nature, and they're because at a certain point, your body is not going to allow you to do what you used to do. It's an unfortunate thing.
Or the mind.
This is true. This is
You
true.
know, I mean, we were desperate in the old days. I mean, we didn't have a place to live, and we didn't have money, and we had horrible touring vans that were always breaking down, and just getting around the country was just it could be brutal at times. And it was fun. Eventually we got successful and got tour buses and all that other stuff. But the old van days were fun. Even though it was hard, it was a fun life. We were all together in a little can going down the highway, and every place we stopped there was a party and all the beer we could drink, and I still have some fond memories.
And that's how I talked to a younger artist yesterday, and he was talking about when he's played dates in the US. He's like, overseas, they end up giving me a place to stay. I'm fed. He's like, now it's like if I play over here in the States, if we don't meet the door, then we don't get paid. And, we may be homeless for the night and we don't get fed. So it's definitely a different vibe now.
Yeah, we were homeless for quite a while. I mean, it was like we were lucky, somebody invite us to sleep on the floor of their house, and so it was like constantly waking up next to somebody's cat box in the morning, and at one point, Gibby got the flu. I remember that, and 9 months later, he still had the flu, and it's like, just we got to do something. So by that point, we had enough money to walk into a sporting goods store, and we bought us all sleeping bags.
Okay.
And that was a big deal because, all of a sudden we had wrapping around us when we slept at night. And then Gibby got over the flu. So that was like the first milestone for us was getting sleeping bags. That was awesome.
And you don't think about those things. Everybody thinks, oh, well, you're the rock star. You're going to go from the garage. You may tour a little bit. It's not going to be that bad, but then you're going to be coming and playing bigger venues. Maybe you'll play bars and then you'll play, theaters and then stadiums. And it all happens so quickly. You don't have any time to struggle.
No, and when you're, sleeping on people's floors, that time passes a lot slower.
This is true. I can imagine. So what was your favorite gig ever to play as far as venue and other people that were on the bill with you?
Well, I don't. This may not qualify, but we got to play on the David Letterman show,
Okay.
and that was at the Ed Sullivan Theater. And when I was 6 years old, I watched the Ed Sullivan show and saw the Beatles perform, and that was where it's like, Daddy, you got to buy me an electric guitar. I saw those
Hmm.
girls screaming in the audience, and I was like, I got to get in on that. And to be able to play on that same stage, that was, and to meet David Letterman and all that other stuff, that stood out to me. Other than that, everything's kind of a blur. The Lollapalooza experience. We played the first Lollapalooza tour, and up until Lollapalooza, we would tour around and we would load our own equipment, set it up, including the light show and the smoke machines and the movie projectors, and then tear it down at the end of the night and take acid to drive to the next town so we wouldn't fall asleep and and then all of a sudden there was Lollapalooza, and there were people there setting up our equipment for us, and all we had to do was just walk onto the stage and play and walk off and drink whiskey with body count and iced tea. Uh, that was a lot of fun. So
I
we,
can imagine.
yeah, we got to hang out with a lot of cool bands, Jane's Addiction and Rollins Band and uh, members of Living Color, and that was pretty fun.
Oh, I'm sure. And it's gotta, I mean, you getting to be in Ed Sullivan's theater, especially, that's a total full circle moment.
Yeah, it was profound.
So when you look at, okay, here's a prime example of a band that, we watched Jane's Addiction implode recently. What, about a year ago now, maybe 2 years ago?
Are you talking about when Perry Feller punched out
Yeah, Dave.
Dave
Yeah.
Navarro?
Yeah.
Golly, that was, oh
I mean,
What in the world?
bands are like marriages. I understand that. And there are personal conflicts occasionally, and then if some substance is involved, that can heighten it. But
Yeah.
I mean, at what point, you know,
I got a call from Perry Farrell a few months ago. He's like, I need a new guitar player. And I was thinking, I need Paul Leary, and sent me a song to play guitar on, and I played guitar on it and didn't hear back from him. So I guess I
you
wasn't really the guitar player he was looking for.
possibly, and you may have dodged a bullet, so that could be
Oh
a good
yeah, I mean
thing.
the first thing I thought of is, gosh, do I really want to get punched out on stage if my guitar is too loud?
No, 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 no.
And why aren't those guys using in-ear monitors? I mean, they don't even need to have loud guitars on stage. They could just be direct.
Because some people
Um,
don't like in-ear monitors, I've heard.
well, I've never used them because I'm terrified that there'll be an audio event that would destroy my eardrums. I've known people that have had that happen with headphones, and that's probably the worst part about recording studios is wearing headphones.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, and what I was going to say about, you know, Jane's Addiction, it's like they got together to do this reunion tour. The fans were hot for it, but at what point are you just forcing something as far as being in a band? I mean, you got to know when to say when. I hate to say it, right?
Yeah, I'm sure those guys were set to make a whole bunch of money. And that can be a lot of fun to think about.
Mm-hmm. It can be. So when you look back to the height of your fame, do you have any regrets?
Yeah, when we were on Capitol Records, we were signed to that label by Hale Milgram, who was a super great guy and a music guy, and he loved the Butthole Surfers, and he wanted us on their label. And so it was great to be signed by a label where the president dug us and wanted us on the label. And got to work with John Paul Jones and put out an album. And then suddenly Hale Milgram is fired, and they bring in Gary Gersh, who I think came from Geffen Records and was riding on the success of Nirvana at Geffen Records. And Gary was not so into the Butthole Surfers. And I can remember being super disappointed after Pepper came out that we didn't get a second single off that album. And I was kind of pissed off about that. And then Gary Gersh calls me up when we're in the studio recording After the Astronaut, and he goes, I really want to use one of these songs that you're working on for a Hellboy movie, and it'd be on the soundtrack album and be featured and blah blah blah. And I was like, you know, I really wish had that second single that I wanted so bad, and now you want us to donate one of our songs to sell a soundtrack album. I want to sell our album, and so I turned him down, and that was probably a mistake because I think that may have had something to do with them dropping us as well. That I was not easy to work with for them. So there's regrets like that, but otherwise not too much.
Well, and Hellboy did do pretty well.
Yeah, it's a great movie. I would have loved to have, listened to our song in that movie. I don't know what the fuck I was thinking. That was stupid.
I get where you were coming from though. I mean, why donate something when you just wanted a single for your record to come, another single? I mean, your priority was getting your name and your music out, but to give it away, you know,
It would have probably been really good for us too. I don't know.
it might have been. I mean, I don't care. All I have to do, I know people that haven't even listened to the Butthole Surfers, and it's like I was talking to somebody today, and I'm like, yeah, I'm interviewing somebody from the Butthole Surfers. She's like, I'm supposed to know that name. I know that name, but I'm like, yeah. So we talked about it, but it was funny because even if she didn't know the music, she knew the name. And that's one thing when you have an iconic name like that, no matter what, somebody's going to pick up on the name.
Took my mother 25 years to say the name.
She
Bless her heart.
refused.
She wasn't into it.
So what would she do? Say, my son's band, the Surfers.
She wouldn't even get to that point. I mean, people, friends, family friends would go to the house and say, "Oh, how's Paul doing?" And she just wouldn't say anything. She took all the pictures of me down that were, in the house. She took them all down, and I think she just tried, for a while, tried to pretend that I, didn't exist. But I don't really blame her. Nobody wants their son to grow up to be in the Butthole Surfers. And
Now, if you
she
would have
was
been,
she was just super straight laced.
well, that would be hard to have somebody be super straight laced, and yeah, I kind of had a mom that was conservative, and yeah, she didn't understand me either. So I get it. I get it. As long as I was the conforming little girl, then that was fine. But when I dyed my hair jet black and wore all black clothes, I had a problem.
Uh,
Mm, mm. I wasn't goth, but I looked goth.
mothers and daughters.
Yes, yes. Mothers and daughters that don't see eye to eye, and yeah, not a good thing. So, out of all the songs that are on this record, because I know you also worked with the cover, you did the cover art, you and Gibby. But what songs really stand out to you on this that you were really proud of on this recording?
Um, well, there's one called "I Don't Have a Problem," which was one of the songs that Hollywood Records cut from the album that they released, and so I'm very proud to have that finally coming out. And it was one of those songs where we came up with it in the studio. The King and Gibby and I walked into the studio in Austin, and we all kind of had our own parts on hard drives and floppy disks and whatnot. But then there was a couple of songs that we just kind of put together on the fly in the studio, and that's always a lot of fun to do. And King showed up to the studio one day with this device that would intercept cell phone conversations. It was illegal to have, but he had one. And we turned it on, and all of a sudden there's this guy talking and talking about how he has knives and daggers, or women have knives and daggers, and just going on and on. And it was just so funny. We just put a microphone up to it and recorded it as quick as we could. And so we get a song that's, I have no idea who's doing the vocals on it. But that's kind of Butthole Surfers. On our very first album, we had a drummer that I don't even know his name, and I never knew his name. We didn't have a drummer at the time we recorded our first record. Our drummer and bass player had quit the band, and so it was just Gibby and I. And we had a record deal with Alternative Tentacles, and we were in the studio, and we were doing our best to try to talk friends into coming over and play the drums for us. And once they did it, they didn't want to come back. And we were making racket in the studio one day, and there's a knock on the door, and we answered it, and there's this short guy with sideburns and disco shoes and bell-bottom pants, and he goes, "Hey man, I'm from New York. I'm a drummer. I heard noise, and I was wondering if y'all need anybody to play drums." And it's like, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, we do." And so he came in, and we pulled up the song called "Hey." I don't know if you're familiar with our first record,
Mm-mm.
but it's sort of a pop song. The first song is a raucous punk song, and then we went to a sweet melodic pop song in "Hey." And he recorded drums for that. And he insisted on recording every drum one at a time, starting with the hi-hat. Okay, let's start with a hi-hat, and then the kick drum, and then the snare, and then he walked out of the studio before we even got his name. And that's, I like that song a lot. And it's just weird that we have people on our records that we don't even know who they are. And the same thing with Locust Abortion Technician. As we were living in Winterville, Georgia, at a house. The band had a house, and I think I was up on acid one night, and then everybody else went to sleep, and I wanted to record. We had a tape machine. We put in this giant 8-track tape machine, and we had two microphones and a tape machine. And so the band, while they were asleep, I was like, I didn't want to wake anybody up, so I pulled out my transistor radio and turned it on, and immediately there's this old lady talking on the radio. And so I put a microphone and hit record as fast as I could, and got her talking about how I was assaulted sexually, and ever since then I can't sleep. I've been having trouble sleeping, and that became the lyrics that became the singing on a song on that album, and that's a lot of people's favorite album is Locust Abortion Technician, and it's it's a stupid song, really super stupid, but it's heavy, and I just like random things that happen that you're not planning on, and you just got to be ready to hit the record button and capture things. So I don't even remember your question.
No, it's fine. And the funny thing is, when I say, well, then, firstly, you would definitely like the way we have our society where you can quickly record things at a whim because of us having phones. But I was going to say back to that drummer that wanted to record each drum individually. I'm wondering what he might have been on at the time, walking into the studio all slick like that. I'm just wondering if he wasn't on something.
I don't recall him seeing, him being stoned or anything, but I'm sure Gibby and I were stoned. That was the
So,
one thing we could always afford pot.
well, and I learned from my late husband about actually about 7 years ago now. Uh, it is no longer Indiana ditchweed as he would call it, because he liked pot. He stopped smoking, and then when he started getting terminally ill, he wanted to do medical marijuana. It's like, okay, so he's imbibing, and we go and get the stuff from the store. He's imbibing, and he's taking the normal, like what he would do with the old school Indiana ditchweed. That's not that potent. I'm like, I'm gonna go upstairs and write. He's like, babe, can you sit down with me? I'm like, what do you mean?
Hold my hand.
Oh no, he wanted me to hold his legs because everything was pixelating.
Oh boy.
It was moving around. I'm like, sure, babe, I'll sit right here and hold your legs down. He ended up vomiting because he hit too much.
Oh gosh.
So he's like, this stuff's not like what I'm used to. I'm like, obviously not.
No.
Much more potent than it used to be.
But
But
yeah, we were always smoking the potent stuff. We would just go to Seattle just for the purpose of getting, in Northern California where they had weed that tasted like cherry cough syrup.
oh wow, okay.
I miss those weeds.
Well, weed is definitely different than it used to be. I mean, it's definitely it's not as tame. And I wasn't one to use it, and I rarely use it if I do. But I do edibles, I don't smoke it. So,
And I do edibles from time to time, but it's not the same. I do edibles because I'm in chronic pain, and
yep.
so you understand. But it does help. It beats the hell out of oxycodone or any of those other things.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah.
I had to stop smoking. Just my lungs just couldn't take it. If I took a hit, I would be coughing my head off, and that's just like I had to stop. So and also I would smoke a little and just start getting paranoid and stuff. It's like in the old days I couldn't smoke enough. I mean, I was no matter
Hmm.
how strong it was, I was just going to smoke as much as someone would let me. And
No, for me, if I do an edible for like 3 days in a row, if I do it for the fourth day, I start feeling my mood going the crapper. I start tanking as far as depression. It's like, nope, can't do that. So I'll deal with the pain. I just live with the pain. So I understand. I
yeah,
completely get it. So if you, what do you have plans for this summer then? I mean, I know you're working on getting the documentary out. So are you producing anybody this summer?
um, no, the last album I produced was by a fellow named Gus Engelhorn, and that record just came out a few weeks ago, and I'm really proud of that record. I had a blast making that record with him and his wife, and his music is awesome. And then I'm mixing an album for an old band from Austin called Corn Pone. It's a terrible band name, but the
Says
guitar
the
player,
man from Butthole Surfers.
yeah, that's why I can say that,
I know. I'm just,
but yeah, this there was a band, and they were sort of peers of ours in Austin, and their guitar player died of an overdose, and
oh,
that was many years ago, and the singer decided he wanted to put an album out that they recorded and never put out, and it was never mixed. So I'm mixing an album for them, and that's a lot of fun because there's no time pressure, and I just kind of work a couple of hours a day and take a day off if I need to. And the singer Anthony is a lot of fun to work with. He's enjoying the mixes, and that makes it fun when the band you're mixing likes the mixes you do. You know, it doesn't always work out like that, but other than that, I'm riding my bike and going swimming. You know, it's just nothing gets better than that.
How's the heat down there?
Well, it's going to be bad, but at the moment, it's just started raining.
Ah,
It's raining outside right now. I can hear it. But, it's been a really nice May. We've had a few hot days, but once it gets really hot, then I just have to ride my bike early in the morning and then take naps in the afternoon.
mm, nothing wrong with that. Because, I mean,
No,
the one thing that we don't realize as kids or younger people is heat zaps you, especially the older you get, heat takes it out of you completely.
yeah, I used to love jogging and riding a bike when it was 105 degrees, and that would just absolutely kill me now. If it was 95 degrees, it would kill me. I can't take it at all.
I understand. I so understand. So, hmm, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to add?
No, unless you want me to grab my cat and bring him over here.
That's up to you. If you want your kitty
Hold
to
on,
make an
just
appearance,
take me a
okay,
second.
no problem.
Come here, Milo.
Let's see Milo.
Oh, it's gonna be okay, buddy.
Aw, he's beautiful. He is
Yeah, he's a
beautiful.
he's a lot of fun. We got him from the Feral Cat Association of San Antonio as a kitten, and my wife and I have had this is our third cat. The other cats, were adults when we got them, and we've had wonderful cats, and this one's also a wonderful cat. But since we've raised him from a kitten, it's like he's our boy.
Hmm. Yeah. Mine I got from the shelter. My cat before that was my neighbor's cat who wandered over to my house and didn't want to leave.
That yeah, our previous cat was that. The neighbor one day came over and said, "Hey, our cat's spending a lot of time at your house. Do you want him?" They
Ew.
had eight other cats, and he wasn't
Oh,
getting enough food to eat, and he was getting beat up, and
yeah.
they loved that cat a lot. It wasn't like they were indifferent to it, but they wanted what was best for him, and he came over and he adopted us, and he was a pretty spectacular cat.
Yeah.
He
Chloe, they ended up, she kept coming over to the house and the owner took her back. And finally, one day, she's just like, I don't know what to do. I'm like, it's up to you. She came home from work and by the time we got back home, because we saw her at work, she's like, she hissed at me this morning. I'm like, I don't know what to say. As soon as we got back home, she was sitting on our front stoop and that was it.
she made a decision.
Yeah. And in fact, when I moved here, because I they have rules about how many pets you can have. They're like, you're only allowed three animals or two animals, and I had two dogs. I'm like, okay, so now you're contraband cat. That's it. Because I'm not getting rid of my cat who's like 17 years old. I'm not doing that. Mm-mm.
No, 17. Wow.
Yeah, she was up there. And she was a sweetheart, but yeah. So if there's nothing else, I guess, sir, I thank you for your time and coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Talking to Paul, it's kind of amusing when he said that his mom kind of took the pictures down and didn't really want to acknowledge. And I mean, it's kind of weird when you think about that. Although, as much as my mom and I didn't get along, I think if I were being a successful musician, my mother would have been like, oh, yes, this is my daughter. Because no matter how many times her and I didn't get along, if I had achieved something, then she would be all about it. And well, that was her. But I think, this is when he talks about that moment of coming full circle, and that's the way I described it. But, being a kid and watching the Beatles on Ed Sullivan and then turning around and getting to stand there on that same stage it's got to be an awe-inspiring moment. You know, when anytime we've come full circle in our life, I think it's one of the bigger deals for us because, you know, you've completed this cycle. And I remember, and I've talked about this before, when there was a time back in 1993, and I had already met this person. I had already met my idol, and I got him to sign my program. He had already signed a program, but this time I got a picture with him. And I remember thinking, wow, this is so cool, and da 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 da. But then fast forward, so basically almost 30 years, because it was 2022 and 1993 is when I had my picture with the program in my hand. And I think that's what the bizarre thing is. In that picture, you can see that I have a tour program in my hand. And so here it is, almost 30 years to the day. And he has my book in his hand. And that was kind of a full circle moment, because it was kind of like all those years of listening to his music, I got to, I was inspired. It meant something to me. I enjoyed it. And for me to be able to turn around and hand him a book, which I hope he enjoyed, I'll never know, but being able to be in that experience, that full circle, that now I had achieved this, and he seemed pleased that when I gave it to him. But it's that moment of, look how far you've come on a journey. And I don't want to say it's the fool's journey, the hero's journey, however you want to talk, but it's a journey you're on from that moment to the end piece. It's like, look how far I've come. Look how far I've grown. Look how much I've grown. And look what I've achieved. And I think sometimes we don't look at those achievements and think, wow, okay, I did this. We kind of move past it and don't settle in. But I'm pretty sure that Paul sat there and really did take that moment in. I mean, not only was he in the Ed Sullivan Theater, he was meeting David Letterman. And at the time, David Letterman was a pretty big deal. He's still, people still know who he is, but it's not the same. And I think being able to get back the record and make it into something that you want to make it into, especially as a creative. I know authors that they signed a publishing deal and the publisher changed things for their book. You can't put this scene in there. You can't have this cover. And then when they finally get the rights back, they do what they want to do. That's one of the reasons why I have not even bothered trying to pursue to get an agent, because I want to keep my creative control. And maybe that's bad, but that's where I am at in my writing life. And even with the podcast, I've talked to people about AI that's like, yeah, I could get a co-host. Why would I want to do that? If people like the show, that's what matters. And I try to keep it as real as possible. I like that Paul was willing to go back in time with me and talk about being in the van. And yeah, as a touring musician, sometimes you don't have much. And there's stories from many musicians about that. But the thing is, we don't usually see those stories. When it's portrayed in movies or books, we go from that moment of just trying to the struggling musician lands the record deal to suddenly they're touring and they're on a bus and they have all the, it's not always that easy. There's a lot of work. And usually, as most people know by now, overnight success is not overnight success. And to be able to still be in the business for this long, even though they're not touring, they're still putting a record out, says a lot. If you want to check out the documentary, I have not seen the full documentary, but I've seen clips of it, and it's really good from what I saw. So I would definitely check it out when it comes out and it's available. But on that note, I thank you guys for tuning in. I thank Fast Susie for the intro and outro music. I thank Paul for coming on the show. And the Butthole Surfers new record comes out June 26th. So check it out. It is After the Astronaut. So definitely check it out if you get a chance. And I thank you guys, whether it be morning, noon, or night, or evening, whenever you're listening. I truly, truly do appreciate it. And I'll catch you next time, guys. Bye.